Fenrir, the proud and fearsome wolf of the Norse mythology, was the son of the mischievous god Loki and the giantess Anrboda of Jotunheim. After the abduction of the wolf by the gods of Asgard, it was brought back from the land of the giants, and was later detached from his siblings Hel and the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, and was kept in the home of the gods because of the threat it represents, so the gods decided to keep an eye on him. Time moved on, and only the god Tyr enjoyed the wolf's company. He played with it and fed the wolf its meat. But, when the gods saw how much it increased daily, a wolf which was once a cub started growing so fast, becoming bigger, stronger and fiercer than they could have ever imagined. And as all the predictions declared that he was destined to be their destruction, it didn't take too long for the gods to resent the wolf, all except Tyr. The gods then resolved to bind the scary wolf in their land. So they crafted strong chains and shackles made in their forge, which they took to Fenrir that he might prove his strength on them. The wolf, to whom the chains did not appear really strong, let them do as they pleased. They wrapped the huge chains around Fenrir and shackled his paws, while the wolf waited motionless while they did this. But the moment he stretched himself, the chains broke, and he was again loose. The great wolf howled to the moon, a howl of triumph and joy. Then, the gods made another chain stronger, called Dromi. This likewise was for the wolf to try. They assured him that it would be renowned for his strength, if so strong bond could not confine him. The wolf saw plainly that this chain was exceedingly strong, but at the same time felt that his power was greatly increased since he broke the first bond. It also occurred to him that if he would become famous, he must expose himself to some risks. The beast therefore allowed them to fasten him with the chain. When the Assyrian gods had chained him, the wolf shook himself, kicked, and dashed it on the earth. The gods moved back involuntarily as the chains fractured and broke with such violence that the pieces flew far away. Thus, the beast freed himself from Dromi. The gods, being now fearful that they would be unable to bind the wolf, sent a messenger to some dwarfs in Svartalheim, with instructions to create a chain unlike anything ever made before, which caused the creation of the chain called Gleipnir, composed of 6 materials: the sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, the roots of a mountain, a bear's tendons, a fish's breath, and a bird's spittle. Once the dwarfs were done with the work, the chain that came out from it was as soft and flexible as a silken cord, though of exceedingly great strength, and weighed next to nothing. The messenger then rode back to Asgard with the chain on his side. The gods then took the wolf with them, and went to the shore of the lake Svartnir. There, they showed him the bond, asking him whether he could break it or not, as it was somewhat stronger judging from its thickness, which it appeared to be. The gods then handed it from one to another, and tried to break it themselves, but in vain. After he has taken a look to the strange bond, the great beast sniffed the air and scent treachery and refused to be tied up by it. But Thor just kept on provoking the wolf, and with his amber eyes flashing in the moonlight, he looked toward the gods and talked to them about his suspicions, but Odin and his fellows denied it. But Fenrir was way too far to be a brainless beast, so in order to prove there was no cheating, the wolf challenged the gods that it would let them tie him up if one of them place his hand in its mouth. Fenrir promised not to bite down until the plot has proved not to be tricky, and would open its mouth, releasing the hand once it has escaped from the bond, or when the gods have freed him in case he was not able to break the bond himself. The gods looked at one to another, but no one would put forth his hand. Then Tyr, Odin's son, stepped forward and raised his right hand. Fenrir lay on his side, and Tyr put his hand within the jaws of the wolf. The wolf closed his teeth gently until they held Tyr's hand at the wrist without cutting the skin, and he closed his eyes. The wolf now began to struggle, and the more he strove to get loose, the more tightly did the bond to restrain him. When they were certain that the beast had been immobilized and that they were in no danger, the gods laughed, but Tyr was silent. He could feel the sharpness of the wolf's teeth against his wrist. Then Fenrir stopped struggling. He lay there unmoving. The wolf looked at Tyr and the god looked at him bravely, and slowly closing his eyes, Fenrir bit down on the god's wrist. Tyr didn't make any sound, but simply wrapped his left hand around the stump of his right one and squeezed it as hard as he could to slow the spurt of blood. When the Aesir saw that the wolf was effectually bound, they took the end of the chain which was fastened to the bond, and drew it through a huge rock, which they secured far down in the earth. In its yawning jaws the gods stuck a sword, the handle of which was driven into its lower jaw, while the point penetrated the upper one, wedging the jaw open and preventing it from ever closing. The wolf growled inarticulately, and the saliva that came out from his mouth formed a river. With his furious eyes, the wolf looked at the gods and made the promise to patiently wait until the end of the world. When the time comes he would destroy both the moon and the sun, but more importantly he would take the most pleasure on killing Odin, the All-Father. And there, the wolf would lay down until the end of all things, till Ragnarok comes. With the sense of dread in their minds, the gods quietly left that place where the river of saliva flowed down into the dark lake. But once they were far enough they all smiled, except Tyr, who lost his hand on his rashness. He bound the stump of his wrist tightly with a cloth, and he walked beside the gods back to Asgard. For the gods indeed, the awful fate that stood before them was put to an end for good. At least, that's what they thought. This is how the gods of Asgard bound Fenrir, the fearsome wolf of the Norse mythology. So, do you think there could have been a possibility for the wolf to become friends with the gods of Asgard, if they had not tied him up? But their fear has betrayed them and they chose to restrain the wolf. It was the gods who, in my opinion, inoculate hatred to Fenrir, and somehow sealed their own fate. Believe it or not, people often meet their destiny in the road or path they choose to avoid them. If you've enjoyed the video, leave it a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on the bell as well. And as always, stay curious.